The battlefield was silent now, but silence on such ground was never peaceful. Smoke curled from shattered tanks and burning towers of metal. The air carried the heavy stench of ash and blood, clinging to every breath like poison. Broken banners of two worlds, human and alien, lay twisted in the dirt, stained red with lives that would never rise again. Through the smoke, figures emerged. Tall, armored, and regal, the alien soldiers moved with the precision of predators. At their head walked their queen. Her silver robe swayed against the dust, her crown shimmering faintly in the dying light of fire. Her people had won. The humans had been pushed back, their soldiers cut down. To her army, this was victory. To her, it was another graveyard. She moved slowly through the wreckage, her eyes sharp, searching. There was something heavy in her chest tonight, as if the silence of the dead spoke louder than the cheers of her soldiers. Then, she saw him. Among the bodies lay a human soldier, barely alive. His armor was cracked open, his chest rising in shallow breaths, blood staining his side. His eyes fluttered but did not close, stubborn in their fight to remain open. He was broken, but not yet gone. One of her generals stepped forward, raising his spear. "My queen, let me end him. The last of the enemy must not be spared." Another soldier sneered. "A human, still breathing? He should be crushed beneath our boots. He deserves no mercy." The queen's gaze lingered on the soldier. He was young, his face hidden under dirt and dried blood, yet something in his expression struck her, a fire that refused to die, even when his body was failing. Her generals moved closer, eager to finish the job. Then she stepped forward. Her hand rose, and her voice cut through the air, calm but absolute. "You cannot touch him." The generals froze. Her eyes burned with authority, her silver crown gleaming against the firelight. She spoke again, this time louder, her words carrying like thunder across the dead field. "He is mine." The army stirred with shock. Her generals looked at one another in disbelief, but none dared defy her command. The queen moved past them, kneeling beside the broken human. With her own hands, she lifted him, his head falling weakly against her shoulder. His breath rattled, barely holding on, yet still alive. Behind her, whispers spread like wildfire. The queen had claimed a human. The queen had defied her own law. But no one dared stop her as she walked through the battlefield with the soldier in her arms, carrying him toward the looming gates of her palace. The night sky swallowed them as they vanished into the shadows, leaving behind the army and its confusion. None knew what fate awaited the human soldier. None but her. Inside her heart, she felt something she had not felt in centuries. A flicker of defiance. A flicker of memory. And a flicker of something dangerously close to hope. The palace gates closed behind her, shutting out the cries of the army and sealing away the whispers of doubt. Torches flickered against the vast marble walls, their flames casting long shadows as the queen carried the wounded soldier deeper into the heart of her domain. Jason's body was heavy in her arms, but she did not falter. His breath rattled against her shoulder, shallow and weak, yet it was steady enough to remind her that he clung stubbornly to life. Every step echoed with risk. If the council learned of what she had done, questions would turn to accusations, and accusations would turn to rebellion. Still, she did not stop. At last, she reached a hidden chamber beneath her private wing of the palace. It was a place known only to her and trusted few. She laid Jason down upon a bed of woven silk, an odd resting place for a human soldier covered in dirt and blood. For a long moment, she stood over him, her hand hovering above his chest, as though she battled with the choice she had already made. Her most loyal attendant, a tall alien woman named Sarah, entered quietly. Her skin shimmered with faint blue markings, her eyes wide with disbelief. "My queen," she whispered, "what is this? Why bring an enemy here? If the council discovers this, they will call it treason." The queen turned, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of command. "He is under my protection. No blade will touch him while he breathes. Do you understand?" Sarah lowered her head, though unease lingered in her eyes. "Yes, my queen, but the others will not remain blind for long. They will see what I allow them to see," the queen replied. Her tone softened slightly as her gaze drifted back to Jason. "And to them, he will not be an enemy. He will be my personal guard." The words tasted strange even as she said them, but it was the only lie strong enough to shield him. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. As you command. The days that followed were a blur of pain and silence for Jason. He drifted in and out of fevered dreams, waking to the faint scent of alien herbs and the cool touch of hands that tended his wounds with care he did not understand. Sometimes he heard voices, whispers in a language he barely knew, or the firm tone of the queen herself, speaking words he was too weak to answer. When strength finally returned to him, he opened his eyes to find her sitting beside him. No crown rested on her head now, only the softness of a woman who watched him with unreadable eyes. He tried to sit up, but his body refused. His voice came out rough, broken by thirst. Why did you not let me die? For a moment, she did not answer. She only studied him, her silver eyes tracing his face as if searching for something hidden beneath the scars and weariness. Then she spoke, her voice quiet, almost human in its tone. Because I chose not to. He frowned, confusion hardening his gaze. Your people, they hate us. You should have killed me. You still can. She leaned closer, her voice low but steady. You are under my protection now. No blade will strike you without striking me first. Jason stared at her, trying to understand. Suspicion gnawed at him. Was he a trophy? A pawn in some cruel game? Or something else entirely? Yet as he searched her eyes, he found no mockery, no malice. Only a weight he could not name. Word spread quickly beyond the queen's chambers. Whispers slithered through the palace halls, carried by curious servants and sharp-tongued nobles. The queen had taken a human into her private wing. She had named him her guard, but few believed that lie. Rumors painted him instead as something far more scandalous, her lover. Every bow in the corridors felt heavier. Every glance at Jason carried contempt or envy. Yet none dared question the queen openly. She was the empire's crown, and her word was law. At night, when the palace quieted, Jason sometimes heard her footsteps as she came to check on him. She never lingered long, but her presence was enough to remind him that his life was no longer his own. He owed her everything, and yet, he did not know why she had chosen him. And so, in the shadows of a palace filled with whispers, suspicion, and silent rebellion, a fragile bond began to form, one that neither soldier nor queen fully understood. Nights in the palace stretched long, and for Jason, they were filled with uneasy silence. His body healed slowly under the queen's care, but his heart carried the weight of questions he could not answer. Why had she spared him? Why did she risk everything for a man she should have hated? At first, their conversations were brief, little more than exchanges of necessity. She would ask if he was strong enough to walk, if he needed food, if his wounds pained him. He would respond with clipped words, his voice still rough with distrust. Yet as days turned into weeks, something shifted. One evening, when the moonlight spilled pale silver across her chambers, Jason found himself sitting across from her at a low table. She poured him a cup of bitter herbal tea, its scent strange but calming. For a time, neither spoke. Then, to his surprise, it was she who broke the silence. Do you dream of home? She asked softly. Jason looked down at the cup in his hands. His home felt like another lifetime, a distant place swallowed by the roar of war. I do, he admitted. But the more I dream of it, the less real it feels. Sometimes I wonder if home ever truly existed, or if it was only something I imagined to survive the battlefield. Her silver eyes lingered on him, heavy with a kind of sorrow he had not expected. I know that feeling, she said. The crown took my home from me long ago. The palace is no home. It is a cage, gilded with power and silence. Jason studied her, caught off guard by her honesty. You have everything. An empire. An army. Power beyond anything I could imagine. And yet, she whispered, almost bitterly, I am alone. The words struck him. They came not from a ruler, but from a woman burdened by a crown too heavy to bear. He saw, for the first time, the person beneath the robes of royalty, the quiet ache of someone who had traded happiness for duty. Their talks grew longer after that night. Sometimes she asked about the human world, about music, about stories told around campfires, about laughter shared among soldiers. He would tell her of nights spent under open skies, of songs sung to chase away fear, of comrades who became brothers. Other times, she spoke of her youth, before the weight of empire bent her shoulders, of starlit gardens now long abandoned, of freedom she once tasted but lost forever. Slowly, suspicion gave way to something else. Trust, fragile but real, grew between them. Jason noticed it first in the way she lingered when she came to see him. No longer just to check on his wounds, but to sit beside him, to share silence that felt strangely comforting. She noticed it in the way he began to protect her, not because he owed her his life, but because he wanted to. When courtiers cast their venomous stares, Jason stood tall at her side, as though daring them to speak their doubts aloud. Rumors continued to grow, spreading like wildfire through the palace. Servants whispered behind closed doors. Nobles smirked with poisonous amusement. "The queen has taken a human to her bed," they said. "She has fallen in love with the enemy." Neither Jason nor the queen addressed the whispers, but both felt the weight of them pressing closer with every passing day. One night, after an evening of quiet talk, Jason rose to leave her chambers. She stopped him with a single word. "Jason." He turned, and for the first time, her voice trembled. "Do you hate me for what I am?" The question stunned him. For all her strength, all her command, there was fear in her eyes. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I hate the war. I hate the death it brings. But you—" He hesitated, then finished. "You are not the war." Her breath caught, and for a moment, the walls around her seemed to crack. In that silence, something unspoken passed between them, something dangerous, something undeniable. Neither admitted it aloud. Not yet. But the bond was no longer hidden. It had begun to grow roots, strong and deep, in the shadows of palace walls. And soon, that bond would be tested by blood and betrayal. The bond between Jason and the queen grew stronger with each passing night, but so too did the dangers surrounding them. The palace walls were thick with whispers, and whispers in such halls were sharper than blades. Nobles watched with narrowed eyes, their smiles painted thin and false. Generals bowed to their queen, but behind her back their loyalty wavered. To them, Jason was a stain upon the throne, an insult carved into the heart of their empire. And in the silence of hidden chambers, those whispers began to take shape as plans. The first attempt came quietly. Jason had been walking the palace halls alone, his strength now fully returned. The moonlight spilled through high windows when he heard the faint shuffle of footsteps behind him. Before he could turn, a blade slashed from the shadows. Instinct saved him. He caught the attacker's wrist, twisting hard until the dagger clattered to the floor. The assassin hissed in alien tongue, lunging again, but Jason drove his fist into the man's throat, sending him crumpling to the marble floor. By the time guards arrived, the assassin had vanished into the night, leaving only blood on the tiles. Jason said nothing of it to the queen. He did not want her to bear yet another weight. But the second attempt could not be hidden. It came deep in the night, when the queen slept in her private chambers. Jason stood outside her doors, the role of guard now not just a disguise, but his true duty. He heard the faint click of steel. His hand went to the hilt of a stolen alien blade just as the doors burst open. 3 assassins surged inside, cloaked in black, their weapons gleaming with poison. Jason moved without thought. He tackled the first, driving steel into his chest before he could reach the bed. The queen awoke to chaos, the clash of metal, the hiss of blades, the grunt of struggle. She reached for her own weapon, but Jason was already fighting with everything he had. The second assassin swung high, his blade slicing across Jason's arm, but Jason ignored the pain, slamming his shoulder into the attacker and driving him into the wall. The third assassin lunged for the queen. For one breath, her crown was in danger, her life seconds from ending. Then Jason threw himself between them, his blade cutting a clean arc that dropped the assassin where he stood. When silence fell, the chamber reeked of blood. Jason stood over her, his chest heaving, wounds dripping crimson. She stared at him, wide-eyed, not with fear, but with something deeper, something that shook her to her core. You saved me," she whispered. Jason winced, wiping the blood from his blade. "I told you, no blade will touch you without touching me first." Her breath trembled, and in that moment, the walls around her heart finally broke. She stepped forward, her hand pressing gently to his wounded arm. The crown, the throne, the empire, all of it seemed to fall away. "Jason," she said softly, "if they see you only as a scandal, then let them whisper. Let them plot. You are more than what they believe." He met her eyes, seeing no ruler there, no empress of fire and iron. Only a woman whose heart beat fast and fierce, who had chosen him against every law of her world. From that night, their bond was no longer hidden. They stood together in public, side by side, her guard in name, but her partner in truth. Nobles sneered, generals seethed, and whispers grew into threats, but Jason no longer doubted his place at her side. And the palace knew it as well. The queen had chosen her human, and nothing in the empire would ever be the same. The palace never truly slept after that night. Every corridor seemed to echo with footsteps. Every shadow felt heavy with suspicion. Jason remained close to the queen at all times, his hand never far from the hilt of his blade. The servants bowed lower when she passed, but their whispers grew sharper, dripping with venom. And still, she carried herself with calm authority, her crown gleaming as if untouched by scandal. But Jason could see it, the strain in her eyes, the silence that lingered when they were alone. Something weighed on her, heavier than court politics, heavier even than the threat of rebellion. It came to light one quiet evening. The queen stood on her balcony, silver light spilling across her figure as she gazed at the stars. Jason joined her silently, leaning against the stone rail. For a long while, they said nothing. The night stretched wide and endless above them, the constellations burning bright against the darkness. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was low, her words almost carried away by the wind. "You remind me of someone I once loved." Jason turned, his brow furrowing. There was no jest in her tone, no mask of royalty. Only raw truth. She kept her gaze on the stars. "It was centuries ago, long before the throne bound me. He was human, like you." Her breath caught slightly, but she pressed on. "He was captured during one of the early wars. I was not queen then, only a princess, free from the weight of a crown. He should have been my enemy, but he was kind, brave, reckless in the way humans often are. And I loved him." Her hands tightened on the rail, silver rings gleaming in the starlight. "But the Empire found out. They called it betrayal. They killed him before my eyes to remind me of what duty meant." Her voice broke, only for a moment, but it was enough to reveal the centuries of pain buried in her heart. "Since that day, I buried the part of me that could love. I wore the crown. I obeyed the Empire. I killed my own heart to survive." Jason's chest tightened. He had never seen her so vulnerable. The queen, who silenced armies with a single command, now stood before him not as a ruler, but as a woman scarred by loss. "And then I found you," she whispered. "Broken on the battlefield, yet refusing to die. You carry his same fire, his same defiance. When I looked at you, it was as if the centuries fell away, and the wound I buried tore open again." She turned to face him, her silver eyes shining with unshed tears. "I do not protect you out of pity, Jason. I do not keep you here as a pawn. I love you, and it terrifies me." The words struck him harder than any blade. For a moment, he could only stare, his heart pounding in his chest. She had laid bare her deepest wound, offering him the truth no one else had ever heard. Slowly, he stepped closer, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "You say I remind you of him, but I am not him. I am only me." Her lips parted, as if to speak, but he continued. "And if I stand by your side, it will not be as a shadow of a man you lost. It will be as myself, as the man who chooses you now, in this moment, no matter what the Empire says." For the first time in centuries, the queen let her tears fall. She reached for him, her hand trembling as it touched his cheek. And when Jason's hand covered hers, the silence between them burned with a promise neither needed to speak aloud. Whatever came next, whether scandal, rebellion, or war, they would face it together. The queen's confession bound them closer than any oath, but with closeness came peril. The palace walls could no longer contain the storm brewing within them. Word of her defiance spread beyond marble corridors, seeping into the veins of the empire itself. The council gathered in secret chambers, their voices dripping with outrage. "She has betrayed us," one noble spat. "A human sits at her side as if he were her equal. This cannot stand." A general pounded his fist on the table. "Her heart has clouded her judgment. We are one step away from civil collapse. Remove the human, and her throne will be safe." The verdict was unanimous. They demanded Jason's execution. The message reached the queen in the council hall, where all the empire's power watched her from gilded seats. The demand rang out like a sentence carved in stone. Deliver the human to us. Let him die, and your crown remains untouched." The queen rose slowly from her throne. Her silver eyes swept across the room, calm yet unyielding. "You wish for his death?" she asked. "Yes," they hissed. "Then hear my decree," she said, her voice carrying like thunder. "If Jason dies, I die with him." Gasps filled the chamber. Nobles paled, generals stiffened, the weight of her words striking harder than any weapon. Never before had their queen spoken such defiance. "Strike him," she continued, her voice rising, "and you strike your queen. Kill him, and the blood of your empire runs with mine. This is not a request. This is law. He is under my protection, and I will not yield." Chaos erupted. Some shouted rebellion, others cried treason. The council fractured before her eyes, torn between loyalty and fury. But Jason, standing at her side, saw only her. She had chosen him over an empire, and no force in the galaxy could undo that truth. That night, civil war stirred within the palace. Loyalists clashed with conspirators in dark halls, blades flashing in torchlight. Assassins returned, fiercer and more desperate than before. Jason fought at the queen's side through every ambush. Together, they carved their way through betrayal and blood, their bond forged not just in whispers, but in battle. He shielded her from blades meant for her crown. She struck down traitors who sought his life. In the heat of battle, amidst the chaos of shouts and steel, Jason felt something he had not known since his soldier days, a purpose. Not the hollow orders of generals, not the endless march of war, but something deeper. To fight for her, not because she commanded it, but because his heart demanded it. Their enemies grew desperate. The council, seeing their grip slipping, unleashed their final blow. In the grand hall, before banners of silver and flame, an army of loyal guards turned their blades against their own queen. The queen raised her hand, summoning the full weight of her power, her voice cutting through the clash. "You would turn against me for loving a man? Then you are no empire of mine." Jason stood beside her, his blade ready, his eyes alight with fire. "Then let us finish this together." And they did. The hall erupted into a storm of steel and fire, every blow carrying the force of defiance. Jason fought like a man reborn, his every strike fueled not by survival, but by love. The queen unleashed her wrath, her crown blazing, her commands breaking enemies with the force of gods. When silence finally fell, the hall lay in ruins. Their enemies broken, their power shattered. But the price was clear, the empire would never forgive her. The throne was no longer hers to keep. Bloodied but unbroken, Jason turned to her. "If you stay, they will never stop hunting us." She met his gaze, her breath trembling. "Then we will not stay." The dawn that followed was not a dawn of victory. It was a dawn of endings. Smoke rose from the palace, curling into the sky like the last breath of an empire. The great banners that once hung proudly in the hall lay torn and burned. The queen stood with Jason at the edge of the grand courtyard, her crown tilted, her robes torn, her hands still stained with the blood of those who had tried to claim her throne. Behind them, silence reigned. The empire she had ruled for centuries was no longer hers. Jason touched her shoulder gently. "There is no turning back now." Her silver eyes met his, steady despite the weight of all she had lost. "I never wished to turn back," she said. Together, they made their way to the hidden docks beneath the palace. The corridors were deserted, the loyalists either fallen or scattered. Only the hum of machinery filled the air as they entered the hangar, where rows of starships waited like sleeping beasts. Jason paused, his hand brushing over the cold metal of one vessel. "Once we leave," he said quietly, "we will not be soldiers. We will not be rulers. We will only be us." The queen stepped closer, her gaze softening. "That is all I have ever wanted." They chose a sleek starship, small enough to disappear into the void, but strong enough to carry them across the galaxy. As the engines roared to life, Jason took the pilot's seat, unfamiliar controls glowing beneath his hands. She sat beside him, her presence steady, her crown finally set aside on the floor. The ship lifted, breaking free from the palace hangar, from the city of spires, from the empire that had bound them both in chains of war and duty. Through the viewport, the stars stretched endless and free. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence was not heavy, not tense. It was peaceful. Finally, Jason reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation, her fingers intertwining with his. "What now?" he asked softly. Her gaze drifted to the stars, her voice calm, filled with quiet determination. "Now we write our own story. Not as queen and soldier, not as alien and human, but as two souls who refused to bow to fear." Jason smiled faintly, a warmth breaking through the scars of war. "Then let us see how far love can take us." The queen leaned against him, her silver eyes reflecting the galaxies beyond. "Together," she whispered. And with that, the ship vanished into the vast unknown, leaving behind a throne, an empire, and a war that had tried to tear them apart. What awaited them among the stars was uncertain. But for the first time, they were free, not bound by duty or hatred, but by a bond that had survived fire, betrayal, and blood. A bond strong enough to defy two worlds. And so the soldier and the queen carved their destiny at the edges of the galaxy, not as rulers, not as enemies, but as lovers who chose love over war. Their story did not end. It only began.